All of these are much more about a self-disciplined approach to doing graphic design. They are challenging. We've got a 14-week semester. We're constantly rewriting and revising. I'm doing that with the 109 for those of you that have me with that as well. But we want to keep moving forward. We want to keep you on track doing things so that you have relevance to the market. And that's where I'm going to, talk about a few things sort of at the front end of this before we go into a critique. So here we go. Uh-oh, I did something wrong here. Hang on a second. There we go. All right. So here we go. I am going to go into the 108 2W7A. This is the online section. The non-online section looks pretty much the same. It's the one with the pink. It's for the face-to-face class. We'll just kind of go ahead and do this one. This is our last session. Remember, it moves very fast. The big thread through this is learning a bit about integrating graphic design principles more. So in other words, the things that you picked up in the 100 level class, more into working with technically accurate digital files. So the things you learned in the 101, the 102, and the 106 class, kind of taking those to this next level where we're combining it more with design versus just strictly focusing on teaching you the design tools, and then really making sure that you do files that are well prepared for print at a pre-press facility. And again, I hate to say, that's where the money is, okay? Doing things online, there certainly is money in there, but really where the jobs that kind of pay and have benefits and that sort of a thing, they tend to be things that are involved or peripheral to the print prep industry. There are certainly other things that pay quite well that don't deal with print prep. But since print prep is the hardest thing for students to grasp, once you learn that, everything else will be easy. So that's why the focus is on print prep. All right. We're doing all this stuff. We're doing the semester. Whatever you celebrate, I want to wish you a happy holiday season, whether it be Hanukkah, Christmas, those of you that do the communal celebration of Kwanzaa, or just those of you who don't really celebrate anything maybe religious, but just love a beautiful winter solstice. I want to wish you all, a really happy holiday season, and then celebrate, and hopefully we get a better next year, 2026. I'm looking forward to 2026, kind of ready to shed 2025. Let's take a look at a couple points I wanted to share, observational points to the class at large. So this first thing, it's not going to let me do it here. It's a reminder about AI. Not necessarily this class, the 108 class, but I am seeing things kind of popping up. And I want to give you a reminder for AI. So here's my reminder. AI is fine for things like, I'm going to kind of go ahead and do this, is fine for things like comp-ups, mock-ups, or very preliminary creation. In other words, kind of how we use Pinterest to do research, we can use AI to do research. I want you to be very clear about this. Do not use it to generate solutions for any content. So in other words, if you think, well, I can think around for 8 weeks, and then in the 9th week, I'm just going to throw some AI prompts, do really good prompts, throw them in there, and I'm going to turn that in as my solution for the class. I want to, just get rid of that notion right now. Using it to generate solutions for any content has a lot of drawbacks. Those drawbacks can be practical, they can be legal, and of course, they're ethical. You're putting off something that is really almost like, gathering from all these different resources and passing it off as your own work. That's a problem in an ethical sense. In a legal sense, a lot of times AI generated work cannot be copyrighted. So if you're doing it for a company and you've got the solution and you're trying to copyright it and it comes to light, and it will, not from our minute understanding of AI, but from people who can do the research on the item and show legally that it's AI generated, it cannot be legally protected because it is generated from all these sources. And the current precedent in court cases is that AI can generate solutions from all these different places. Just that product then becomes something that is kind of, public domain in a way. So it can't really be copyrighted. So you have an ethical reason, you have a legal reason, and you have a practical reason. The practical reason is this. If you can generate an idea in AI in 5 minutes, you're not needed. Nobody needs you. As a graphic designer, your job is pretty much dead if we could just go and do it with AI. I'll get a secretary who I can pay a very low amount of money, tell her to run the AI prompt, come up with a solution, run it up the flagpole, and that'll be our solution. And for some small companies or people that just don't really care about the quality of the design, that's going to be absolutely fine. That's the reality in which we live. But, and I've used this metaphor before, if you take a suit off the rack, which a lot of people buy, right? That's the new methodology behind buying a suit because it's cheaper, faster, and easier. It doesn't mean it's as good as one that's been crafted for you. Now, I've never been in a financial position to be one of those people, but very recently I had to have a suit tailored. And that means they take the measurements of you and they craft the suit just for you. And instead of maybe $150 or $200, you're certainly looking at a couple $1,000s. So it's not something that you would do lightly or that you would undertake. It is something that you can do though. And I got to tell you that the first time you have a suit that's been tailored for you, it's really kind of a completely different experience than buying something off the rack and even having it altered. It's the same thing with music. If somebody's writing music and it's very specifically written for you, it's something quite different than something that, you can kind of go out and find royalty-free music or royalty-free imagery. All of this stuff is what you are saying, my job is important and I want to do it. And you're kind of contradicting that if you just go running things through AI to come up with a solution. So again, I don't want it to be misinterpreted as all AI is bad and you shouldn't use AI. I think AI is fine for things like doing a comp up or a mock up or preliminary ideation or maybe paperwork that you have to do that can become tiresome, and predictive spreadsheets and a whole bunch of other items I think AI is fine for. But to take it to generate a finished solution, you're not going to be very happy. You may be happy in the short term, but in the long term, it's not a sustainable model and it will not create a sustainable employer position. So please, please, please keep that in mind. The second thing I want to talk about, and it's on the last column of my kind of notes on Padlet to the class at large, is time management. What happens with this particular unit 2 is we do weekly check-ins and you get weekly lecture. I noticed some people didn't really, I looked and it said they viewed 100%, they watched it, they viewed it, but they didn't seem to pick up on the content in the lecture. Lectures are learning experiences, no different than reading a book, no different than listening to a podcast, or no different than watching a video. So first off, you really need to do that. But the second thing is most professional jobs require you to handle time management in some way on a designer end. Your bosses will assign you an item for design, and then you're going to have a deadline to develop it within. And your process, sometimes they don't even care about. They don't, let's see your thumbnails and let's see your, research. I'll concede that there's a big, huge, continuum of what's acceptable there. But the expectation is I'm assigning you something, you have until the deadline to develop it, and you're going to do that responsibly. In other words, if you're being paid for 8 weeks of work, you're not going to try and cram that into a week or two. You're doing 8 weeks of work. That is the expectation in a white-collar profession, or what I would say graphic design is definitely a part of. Your bosses assign you something, you design it, and you have until the deadline to develop it. Unlike any kind of school experience, and some of you are newer to college, others have some college experience, but unlike any of those experiences, there's no one that's going to jump around and go, did you turn this in? Did you get this done? Is it done yet? There's simply, it's done or it's not, and you're employed or you're not. That is the cruel, hard reality of this profession. So, unlike school, no one's going to harass you to stay on track. Nobody's going to make sure that you need to do things. You need to develop that muscle. It's expected of you as a very basic tenet of the job. It's one of the skills that is expected that all designers have. Here's my advice for many of you as I look through this Padlet in both sections. One, craft a schedule for yourself in advance and stick to it. You may say, oh, I'm in the async online class. I like to watch the videos Sunday night at midnight. That's fine, but do it. You may say, I'm in the classroom section of class, so I show up every Thursday at 8 a.m. and we attend and we listen to the lecture. That's fine. That's a little more structured. But if you are async online and you are committing to do this, stick to it. Budget about 2 hours. Rarely do I go over. I know occasionally, once in a while, I do. But to watch the videos, even if you want to break them up into chunks. Some students tell me they break them up into 20 to 30-minute chunks, and they'll watch the videos that way. And then they'll grab a snack or do something else. Whatever it is you do, create a schedule for yourself in advance and stick to it. That includes working on this. So around week 7, we assign this out. And ideally, I would say, 6 hours out of class is what we would expect of a 3-credit class. 3 credits times 2 is approximately 6 hours outside of this viewing or class session. So maybe as an example, every Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday for 2 hours, you work on stuff for Unit 2. Because we have a class on Thursday, or that's when we do the recordings, every Saturday night or Saturday afternoon or Saturday during the day. I don't think they have cartoons anymore, so that might be a good thing to do Saturday morning. Monday, maybe after your classes, Wednesday after your classes, whatever it is, you make your own schedule. Give yourself 2 hours each of those days, so 6 hours maybe a week, and work on it. Work on developing for this class to have everything ready weekly by that Thursday. If you want to, please feel free to use any of the time management stuff that's out there. I have a timesheet that uses on one side a little calendar slot, so you can put in the days that the job is due, and you can fill in exactly what days you want to work on it. You can cross out exactly which days you can't. Maybe Wednesday you're in church for some reason, so you cross that out, this particular Wednesday. Or Wednesday you have a meeting of some kind of a guild or club, cross that out. But that calendar is going to help you stay organized and on top of doing things so that you can create it by the deadline. The other thing is a timeline. A timeline says, I've got this big project, this much time. The problem with a lot of students is they kind of wait. Okay, now I'll do it like a week or 2 before it's due. What a milestone chart will say is, okay, we have 4 products to do. We've got 8 weeks. We'll do one every 2 weeks approximately. And I'll have within the 2-week period, Monday, I'm going to finish up the thumbnails. Wednesday, I'm going to do this. I'm bringing it up on the Padlet so my classmates can give me sort of priority discussion. Now, that process is going to be expected of you. I think the next time that I offer this class, I'm going to make heavy suggestions for that process. In other words, have this done by this date, have this done by this date. Instead of assigning a campaign, which really realistically would be what you would do, kind of work with you to establish your own schedule that works for you, but that you stick on top of. That's going to be key. And again, I think any of the time management stuff that's out there, there's apps that you want to use, but if you want to use the sheet that I've developed, I think that that's a good way to do it. I mean, I've used that sheet for close to 30 years and it's worked well. The last thing I want to emphasize is a frustration that I know some of you have. And it's when you have a love for art or being creative, a lot of times you're looking at what it is that you want to do and people go, oh, he likes art, put him in that graphic design over there. That's same thing, right? The problem is it's not. In art, there's no wrong solution. you can be from the heart and it can be very individual, the message. Whereas with graphic design, it's much more communicative. We worry about a mass market and we worry about mass media in general and the interpretation of it from the largest possible audience. And artists can do whatever they want because it's just about their message and they're communicating. Devil may care. Nobody gets it. I don't care. Nobody understands it. People hate it. I don't care. None of that matters to me because I'm communicating something of the self. But when you are associated with somebody else, in other words, I'm now the trustee for somebody else's message, it matters a whole lot. It matters a whole lot. So, just to kind of reiterate, art is not the same thing as graphic design. Artists often do very well as graphic designers, but it's not a given. There are art programs out there. If you want to major in art, you can go to UW Parkside, you can go to Carthage College, you can go to Mount Mary, you can go to a lot of different places and become an art major. Oftentimes the concern that people have is, well, if I get an art degree, I'm probably not going to make a lot of money. And that may or may not be true. You just have to roll the dice. Statistically, it's a lot harder to make it as an artist. Whereas statistically, it's a bit easier to do it as a graphic designer, but both are challenging. Artists are not graphic designers, and graphic designers are not the same thing as artists. Okay. The skill set, the visuality, the creativity, those are all the same. The ability to oftentimes draw well or to want to express an idea that maybe is not your own is much more graphic designy. Graphic design is about problem solving a visual problem. So instead of like a number problem in math, we're solving a visual problem. And that visual problem needs to have a communicative aspect. So you can't, for instance, and I've used this example a million times, say I'm designing a logo for a construction company. I like purple today. I looked out and I saw a cat and I really love cats. I'm going to do purple cats for the logo for this construction company because it doesn't communicate a thing about the brand for that construction company. It doesn't communicate a thing that the company probably wants to get across about their product. They probably want things like reliability, they do it right the first time, all these different things that are being emphasized. And neither purple nor a cat is going to do that. That's where graphic designers are quite different than artists. Okay. That's why we do a strategy sheet or a creative and design brief at the front end of things. And then we do research and brainstorming. We can use that strategy sheet as the filter for whatever we come up with in brainstorming. And I always emphasize brainstorming or researching two things, right? Comparables, meaning other projects that are kind of like what we're doing, and then inspirations, things that may have nothing to do with what it is that we're developing, but that we would, love to integrate. Maybe I like the color scheme over there. Man, look at that color scheme. It's got nothing to do with my construction company, but I want to try and integrate it because it says something visually. Those colors say something close to what I want to do. Or, maybe it's a particular layout or a typographic handling of things. Those are all inspirations. They're not necessarily the same project. The comparables would be other construction company logos that I'm going to look at and see what they do. Both of those together through the filter of a strategy sheet. And hopefully that's starting to make sense because these things aren't just requirements that you have to do for class. I don't care about creative briefs or design strategies. I just want to get to drawing. That's not the process. And you're going to wind up with a substandard solution. The idea is, and I look at your creative briefs and I look at your strategy sheets, whatever you come up with is articulating what the brand is. I want to see that emphasized in your product. So I don't want you to come up with this great creative brief or this great design strategy sheet and then just throw it away and do something completely different. And I am seeing some of that. Then we need to go back and we need to modify this creative strategy in some way. What is it that we want to say? What is it that we need to know about a particular client or a product or a service? How do we position ourselves so that we have a competitive advantage over all the other comparables? All those things are going to matter as a graphic designer. So Graphic design is not art. Artists communicate on their own agenda. Graphic designers are really trustees for somebody else's message. We're about visual problem solving and emphasizing some kind of communicative aspect about the thing. Uh, in the example that I always use is in the old-fashioned movies. The guy with the white hat, he's clearly the good guy. The guy with the black hat is the bad guy. So if I was designing things and I wanted it to be understood, why would I kind of flip that around? Understand what the problem is and what we need to communicate on behalf of that client. Last thing I just want to tell you is that the most cool or creative idea isn't always going to win. And you'll see this. You'll see this when things are judged by outside sources. We'll do things for the design show, and there'll be things that are just killer cool, and everybody loves it. But somebody from the industry is going to look at it and they're going to say, I don't know. Did that articulate really anything other than cool? You know, they were trying to sell hearing aids and they did it by using tumbleweeds and, you know, old-fashioned Western signs. And how does that tie together? So the most cool or creative ideas don't always win. The most successful ones are those that really articulate a brand and the core attributes of something, and that they do a good job of that as well. That's really what we want to see.